Welcome to the Flower Prophecies, a podcast exploring all things flower essences and remedies and flower therapy, and how this vibrational plant medicine has the potential to heal and shift our individual and collective health and consciousness. We'll be diving deep into the specifics of individual essences, nature's energetics, emotional healing and growth, as well as hearing client case studies, hosting special guests and professionals, and I'll be sharing my own personal explorations and philosophies channeled straight from the flowers. Through my own unearthing, I have discovered what I believe to be the most profound teaching of the flowers, and I now wish to share with you the practice of alchemizing fear into beauty. So welcome back to the Flower Prophecies. I'm Abby Rose, your host and flower essence practitioner. And today on the podcast, we have a special guest, Ewa Maria of Sen Essences. So Ewa has been working with plant medicine and remedies for over a decade. Her deeply intuitive approach is evident through her work that she shares. And today we have her on to explore her journey and wisdom through the natural world. So welcome, Ewa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So let's just get right into it. If you can share what it is you do and a little bit how you landed here.
Sure. It feels like a big question, but I'll try my best to summarize. So basically, because I'm chatting to you, I'm going to speak about the plants mostly. So I've been working with plant essences for some time. It's been a good few years that it's sort of almost taken over my life a little bit. I would say that the main thing for me with the essences is like exploring connection. And I think exploring the relationships with the natural world, with the plant world. When I sort of got into it, I never planned to make essences. I never planned to even put them up on a website of something that I offer as a product or anything like that. It was really my own process and my own journey. And I think that's kind of the continuing to be that. However, I see that it's also something I love to share with others. And so it's naturally sort of started happening that I naturally started to want to share it more and more. And I think especially in South Africa, it's not as known. There are two beautiful libraries of flower essences created by the Platbos, the trees of the Platbos range, and also the South African flower essences. And that's actually kind of was part of my journey to exploring those a little bit years back. But somehow I feel like it's more known maybe in Australia, in Europe, and in the States, where here I feel like people are still kind of wondering what it is, and so that's part of what I'm starting to do more of. And then I'm also offering one-to-one sort of more custom sessions where I'm mixing the remedies as well as depth hypnosis work.
Beautiful.
And a bit of resident attention work, which is something that maybe people don't know so much about, but it's basically more of like working on the physical body, but just it's that's almost like another thing. But at the end of the day, it's like within a one-to-one session, it's something that anyone that comes in, we could kind of work on, whether it's something on the physical level, whether it's something on the mental, emotional level, whether it's something like with the depth hypnosis, there's more of that regression work, also energetic interference work, release, and the essences I feel work so well with all of those aspects. And as we know, like the essences work on sort of the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects, which is really where most of most disease or disharmony kind of like filters down into the physical.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would say, in some way, I'm sort of approaching all the different layers and through the different modalities, but for me also on like a daily level, I'm working with the essences all the time. But I suppose we'll get to that later. But and I also through this work with the plants, it's sort of extended also with sort of animal comms. So, connecting and doing sort of interspecies communication, really.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. But I found that with working with animals, you could get more of a feedback.
Yes.
Like from the owners. Yes. And then it would sort of like, so in the very beginning when this started happening, and, I'll mention it a little bit. I had to touch base a lot with other practitioners and other, to not feel like I'm going crazy or like losing it a little bit, to ground it all. And I think that the animal comms was also helpful because that you can get the feedback and you can get that kind of, you can get it also with plants. Sometimes you'll get like certain information that you wouldn't have known. But I find that, and I find that to be quite beautiful. So, also the work with the animals. So, I think in the end, it felt like what I do is a little bit of interspecies communication, really, but with the plants, with the animals. And then because I years ago, and still it's part of my daily life, is the yoga practice, which I feel like is kind of at the center of a lot of this, because we have to be so sort of aligned and so connected to ourselves to really get a sense that what's really going on, like where are the messages coming from, or so I feel like that center alignment is kind of at the base of it. I think that's kind of what helped me in the beginning to really gauge that it was something external coming in, as opposed to my own mind speaking to me. And I think that those years of the yoga practice and meditation helped me to really get a clear sense of my mind. And so I feel like I think part of I'm putting together like a course that would be covering those three, sort of the work on the self, the animals, and then the plants. I think the animals is great because people love to chat with their pets and their friends' pets and things like that. And then the plants is just kind of adds in almost like I was thinking about it, it's almost like you have a different intention with animals. It feels like you're more like reaching out to see if they have something to say or share, giving them a platform. But then with the plants, it feels to me like that is the case as well. But it often feels like they just give so much more. That's been my experience anyway. There's such a healing coming with them.
Yes.
So, So that's kind of a bit of what I do, and I'll try my best to be quick about how I got here, because I think for a lot of people it's like a life journey, I guess. But
absolutely,
because when I started making essences, I felt a bit of imposter syndrome. I felt like, how am I doing? How is that I can do this? And I didn't do a course or anything. But I realized that there was so much in what I had done in the years before that was really just the basis, the building blocks. And so I started connecting with plants sort of over 10 years ago with this intention of connecting with them. But at the time I wasn't receiving anything back. But I still had that feeling that I wanted to do this. It was just sort of on the side, but it was actually creating a bigger part of my life, because it meant that I changed my diet somewhat, and I, changed sort of certain habits because I was, partaking in this kind of a practice. And then I would say that part of my yoga training, the training was quite intense. And at one stage, they blindfolded us for like about 24 hours or so.
Wow.
And I remember, and I remember that, I had to just become so tuned to my environment, and that was like, it was years ago, but I remember that feeling of having to slow down and really become a little bit more sensitive. And as this one woman that I recently went to go see, she lives in the middle of South Africa, and she's just wonderful, wonderful. Her name was Antoinette Pienaar. If anybody in South Africa must go visit her if they're interested in plants. But she talks about in Afrikaans we say haarworteltjies, which is like the little hairs of the roots that like extend, and then you feel more, you know, and it feels like that. And I feel like the essence work is also like that. You're almost like developing the sensitivity, you know, of like a little bit more like extending as opposed to being blasted with something very, very strong. Absolutely. So I feel like then it was starting, you know, in that way. If I think years back, I mean, I also did like over those years, I was also doing like shamanic journeying and things like that, which later they just sort of like slotted in, you know, in a way with the plant work. But basically, I had like a crash. I think it was over 6 years ago, where I became very, very sensitive, and many things that I'm still kind of integrating in a way. But at the time, I became so sensitive that if I were to hold like certain essences, they would sort of shift things in my body physically. Wow. So I couldn't deny that there was, you know, that there was something going on here, and it kind of just it pulled me in. And because I was sensitive, I didn't want to work with anything too strong. And then I kind of in that time, actually, I was also beginning to travel to Peru and do plant diets there with trees and tobacco. And that was also helping me to really ground. And I think all of those experiences were really showing me the undeniable sort of awareness and intelligence of the plant world, the natural world, and and how beautiful the connection. You know, when we start to develop that connection, I think the sort of the deep wholeness one starts to feel, and that deep sort of joy that is not connected to emotion, you know. And so I was just it was just my life. Just plants became much more of my life, part of my life.
Beautiful.
And then when I came to South Africa, because I was living abroad at the time, I was living in Europe at the time. I came back to South Africa, where I grew up, and I just started working with the baobab here, and I felt drawn to it because I've been working with it from the Flatbush range, and I just ended up going there to see the baobabs and making my own essence for myself. But because the flowers are so big, I ended up making quite a bit of the essence, and I was like, well, I guess I can share this with others as well, you know. And then I not many of my friends were that into the essences that are here, and so I thought I'd put it more out into anyone in the public. That's where the website sort of came through, because I ended up starting to make other essences, and sort of it took off, you know, like that.
Took off. That's beautiful. The baobab, I think, like, we have an Australian essence that is the same, but I think they just call it the boab. I don't know if that's a shortened name there as well, or if it's just a different species, or but I think we just have the same and call it a boab.
Oh, we'd have to have a look. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know that there are different kinds of baobabs across the world, even within Africa, and like Madagascar, and baobabs are very different. And that's also something that's very interesting. Like, even like, you know, like when people talk about pines, there's like 300 different kinds of pines, and how they sense, like how they feel a little bit different, some of them. So I'll have a look into that though.
Because I'd love to. What is the sort of properties and actions that you have sort of derived from the baobab?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's sort of evolved over the time. I think in the beginning, like with many of the trees, because I feel like I was definitely pulled into the essence world through the trees, and still they're sort of often the main sort of go-tos. So very grounding. There was something with the baobab that I felt was very grounding, but also kind of opening up. It was kind of working on that kind of like channel where you're kind of opening up, receiving, and then being able to ground it. But also at the time, I remember right in the beginning, there was almost like a space clearing in the center of the body. That's what I felt with right in the beginning. And now it seems to be part of many creative projects that I do. And I feel like maybe it's because when I went there, it really felt like she was this like African mama that was like almost like space holding. Like she was just so, that nurturing space that one has.
Yeah.
It really felt like that, very rich, very sort of, and it just, so over time, it's felt like I will often kind of connect with the baobab when doing creative projects, and it feels like it just feels very, very fitting. So, but yeah, that's for me. So having said that,
for sure.
have their own experience. Yeah.
For sure. That's beautiful though. I love that. And I can see that though, like the nurturing sort of like mother figure in it. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because with trees, it's interesting how some of them have more of that quality of that nurturing, maybe mothering kind of, where others I feel have a bit of a different feel. But
yeah, definitely. So you were mentioning that a lot of the plants you're drawn to are trees, and they're sort of your foundation. And you do also work with a lot of, I guess, like succulents and other plants, and even underwater species. And I'd love to know your sort of thoughts on the contrast between using plants and things like this and flowers, and sort of what you love about each of them and their differences.
Yeah, so I think for me, like I said, I was definitely drawn in with the trees, because actually, I mean, I didn't mention this, but part of my sort of journey to this, when I had that sort of big sort of transformation in my life, I was living next to the Jura forest in France, and I was just there every day. Like every day, I had to go into the forest to ground, and that was kind of, I really felt like you start to kind of create this bond and this link. And even though most trees flower, we don't associate them with flowers, right? I think for me, the biggest difference between, for example, the trees and maybe the underwater species and the succulents are definitely in the elements. Having said that, I almost struggle to. It's the same as for me when I have to put sort of descriptions of things on my website, and even when I speak to people, I really struggle with sort of like limiting them, because I feel like some of them really do have a feel of it's this, and it's very strongly this. Like, for example, with like the sea lettuce, it feels very clearing and cleansing. You can actually eat sea lettuce as like a lettuce. But it feels very, very cleansing. And when I was first working with it, right in the beginning, when I first made the essence, I was sort of exploring of how it is and what it feels like and everything. And I remember one morning I woke up and I'm like, your eyes are all like poofy, and I'm like that sometimes. And then I was holding it for about 5 minutes, sort of like just getting ready, and it totally transformed my face. Like totally, and I could feel it because, like I said, I could sometimes feel them physically shifting things in my body. It was probably the most physical, like visible transformation within just a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And I'm almost like reluctant to share it, because I was saying, like, if girls knew this, they'd be like,
I was just thinking the same thing.
To watch people like now picking out sea lettuce from the sea, but honestly, like that's what happened. And sometimes it works like that for me, where it really feels like this cleansing. And that's for me, like with the sea essences, it feels like that they have this kind of flowing. I mean, it's naturally, that kind of elemental flowing property, more of that water element. And it sounds so obvious, but it's really part of it. I remember I did a workshop once, and we asked everyone to sort of pick an essence that they felt resonant to. And it was a time of something like astrologically happening, with something to do with emotions. And all of them picked like a sea essence without actually realizing it. I think it was like a blind sort of pick. I can't remember, but all of them ended up picking like a sea one. And so sometimes I feel that there's something like that with working with emotion, something with flowing, a bit more of a flow with it. And then like with the trees, I love more of that anchoring aspect. But I said it's quite difficult to sort of limit it, because I feel that when you start to, because I feel that when working with essences, there's almost like two aspects. There's almost that like vibrational aspect where, like I said, for example, I can feel it like that, or maybe it'll just shift your emotional state or your field, your vibrational field. And then for me, there's that aspect of working with the spirit of the plant, which I think some people speak about and some people speak less about. And I feel like when you tap into that more and more, there's like a whole other world, and then there's really each one can bring you just what you need, you know?
Yeah.
And so they become almost like these master allies, you know? But at the same time, part of my journey really was like, you know, understanding and studying the basics of Ayurveda. It's so vast, but I sort of did the basics, and now it's such a normal part of my life to sort of sense into the elements. But I remember before, I didn't have a real sense of that. I didn't really have a sense of the elements.
Yeah.
And I think now I think maybe more and more people do, and it becomes sort of like obvious, but it's for many people it's actually not. And to sense that okay, I actually need grounding, I'm actually feeling a bit spacey, or I actually need a bit more of a flow, or I need a bit more of that kind of airy ideas or coming in, or change, you know. So or fire, to kind of ignite a bit of a fire within me, you know, which I feel comes a bit more like with the succulents as well. So I feel so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that approach to it, because it makes so much sense, right, to take an elemental approach. But I think, like, even just thinking from what I sort of witness in people around me is they're very attuned to maybe grounding themselves, but not so much to any of the other sort of elements, you know, picking up on when they need a bit more fire and heat and, you know, energy, or picking up when they need a bit more flow and sort of cleansing. I think they're like very in tune with like the grounding, but not so much the others. So it's super interesting to reflect on.
Yeah, exactly. And I was in the beginning when I started working with the essences, I remember, I mean, there's like so much doubt that we have to like kind of sift through. For me, it was the case because I was creating my own, and I was like exploring totally like,
absolutely, I know.
But I remember like putting out like essences in front of my friends and saying, oh, we'll just pick one that you feel drawn to. And because I knew them and what they were going through at the time, they would always pick exactly what I felt would be right for them. So that's also for me in the back of my mind when I started feeling like, oh, but there's something to this, you know, like really, like they didn't necessarily know, because when you're in your own experience, you just think, oh, I'm just taking one, you know. But because I could tell like how they are all different, and so that was interesting. I
love that. Yeah, I love that. Very cool. And I think that's it. There's like an innate sort of unconscious intuition within us all, and like that connection, because we're all connected, right? So that connection to it. So unconsciously, we will sort of try and go for the path that we're meant to most of the time. But when we can like tap into it like consciously and create that deeper connection, there's just so much more to it, and to sort of receive from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the world just becomes so much more alive, you know, when we kind of tap into that inner connection and the connection with the outside world. It just feels like everything just feels like it's speaking to us, or there's like that kind of, you know, aliveness, like
absolutely. And so I was just going to ask, because you sort of host some workshops and things, sort of guiding others in creating this connection and sort of communication with the plants. So I'd just love to hear a bit more of your experiences in doing that and in communicating with them yourself.
I feel like it's something that I'm just starting to do. So I think that I'm starting it out, and it's the experiences are different. People seem to be at different levels. You know, some people have like they're right tapped in and they receive so much, and others are just opening up to it. That's been sort of my experience. So I think it comes in different it comes each time in a bit of a different way.
Yeah.
Depending on the plant and depending on what maybe what I need.
Yeah.
I feel like each time I would just say that each time I feel like I receive what I need.
Yeah.
But in a more sort of like practical way, it comes through for me sometimes with words, sometimes with images, and sometimes with feeling.
Yeah.
So like I've already mentioned, sometimes it'll come through like just a feeling. I find that especially when being with the trees, like physically, they'll often like align me, in fact, like because you can ask them and they will, like if you stand sort of with a tree, it can sort of help to align your structure.
Yeah.
So that's something that also happens. And sometimes I can feel that sort of energetic, sort of like something shifts inside of me when I'm connecting with them, when I'm reaching out to them, which also feels like a response.
Yes.
You know, which also feels like it always blows me away.
Yes.
I don't know what it is. It's like we've been doing it for years, but it always blows me away. It's always like, oh, it's so funny that. But yeah, so sometimes it comes through in these different ways. Sometimes it'll come through with like a wisdom, and sometimes it will be sort of more elaborate. Sometimes I'll do like a journey, like meaning some people do like a meditation or like a more of a structured shamanic journey to a plant. And sometimes it'll be a whole elaborate experience, but other times it'll just be like a really simple knowing or just a really simple thing that I just really needed to receive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I feel like truth is simple, you know?
Yeah.
And like our truth is not, but like the truth is, and you know, if we can call like a truth the truth, but so I feel like sometimes, and with the feeling, it can be sometimes an alignment, sometimes a balancing, sometimes a grounding, sometimes, like I said, like a feeling, and then sometimes I'll receive images or almost like maybe like a vision, but I think because that comes through so. It can come through and you can almost miss it. You know, when you get like a knowing.
Yeah.
It's sometimes like the image, but almost like sometimes like a knowing.
Yes.
So I think it comes through in different ways for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And I'll just share my own experience with you. Just for fun.
Yes, I'd love to hear.
Because I sort of like, when I first started, you know, using the essences and working with them and then, you know, creating my own as well, I felt like I should be like listening in a certain way or hearing in a certain way and, you know, just lack that like trust of what they had to offer me. And you know, now I've sort of uncovered that they speak to me in like almost like in stories and it's like the plants and the flowers have characters of their own, like, and personality of their own. And I think it's so just wild and beautiful that like they can, because here's me thinking I'm just like making a character up in my head and imagining like this character that's a plant. But it's like, no, these are the plants, these are them, the way that they're sort of sending their messages through, they're portraying these characters, that's their personality and that's what they have to share. So it's like, I didn't ever expect that they would come through in that way, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you say that because I feel exactly the same way, that each one has their own flavor.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting a sense of the excitement of it because I can feel like it's such an adventure, right?
Yeah.
It's such an adventure. It's a whole other world.
Yeah.
And also, I think, this is a whole other world. This is a whole other world that I feel like I'm excited for people to be also tapping into more and more. Yeah. Right in the beginning, I remember I kept on receiving like, don't doubt. Because I would like receive a message or something and I'd be like, is that my mind? But I knew it was something else. Yeah. That don't doubt. But I also received a message of don't humanize us, because I think we sometimes have a tendency of like, maybe, you know, but at the same time, I definitely feel that idea of this kind of a feel of them having their own, each of them having their own character or their own traits, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I feel, but I do find it. That's what I think is also interesting when we share these stories between, like, to experience whether people have similar experiences or not. Like, I know that, for example, in certain traditions, they, like more indigenous traditions, they'll say like, you know, like say the spirit of tobacco looks like this or is like this, you know. And I feel like, and sometimes I feel like it can come through like that, but I think that's very much the mythic level. It almost feels to me like they, for me, this is my experience now, that they come through in a way that resonates with us.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So say if they come through like as a queen or something, you know, or it's almost like there's that it's like an interface, you know, and sometimes they would come through more like that, but there is behind that, there's that energy that you sense, because that energy is a little bit different to this other ball of energy that's, you know, another plant. But yet, so I'm aware of not like fixing to those ideas of, say, it came through as like grandfather tobacco for that person, and for me it's coming through as something else. Not to say, oh, it's not that, or it's, you know, just to like honor whatever's coming through. But I love then sharing the stories between together as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because I guess the way that it comes through for each person is going to provoke in that person the, you know, whatever it is that they need to receive from it, you know. So it's going to come through in the way that draws that out of them, you know.
I think so beautiful. For sure.
If there was a, I guess, tip or a bit of advice for people who maybe want to start communicating with plants or even animals or whatever it may be, what would you sort of suggest for them to start by doing?
I think the first thing I would do is exactly what we've been speaking about, is that sensing into the essence of it, like literally the essence of it. So, you know, like same as if you feel like a person that you've just met, like how they feel, you know, compared to another friend of yours, or the space in a room when you enter, it's all has a vibe. So I would say to start to feel into that, because I think that then you start to develop your sensitivities, and they're already there, but it's almost like bringing awareness to them and like, and verbalizing it, and like grounding that knowing, because I think that'll just like dominoes will start to open up. And I also, that thing of like, don't doubt. And I would say, if you doubt, that's not a problem, but write down the doubt and the experience. So I do that sometimes. I'll be like, I could be going crazy, but you know what I mean? And then later you'll see, oh, but that was that message for that. And then, you know, you can write down the doubt. That's fine. I'm doubting. It all sounds like bullshit. It's fine. You know? And, so I would say those are my tips for sure. And then I think to stop and to listen, because I think that to give time to receive. I think that's a big one that I think many people are still practicing. And then explore what works for you, because there's many different ways. Some people do it with meditations. People, you know, explore with teas or baths, connecting with, you know, or like in person, or, you know, plant diets. And there's so many different ways.
Beautiful. It's so interesting just listening to the messages, right? Because I had mentioned to you I had thought about creating a poem for the book, and it just popped into my head this afternoon, the name of a poem. And I was like, I haven't even written the poem yet. Like, and it was like, I think it was something 2 worlds. And I was like, I don't really understand. But then this whole time you've been chatting about this whole other world of these plants, you know?
Love that. I love that. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And, you know, and connecting those worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'd love to know what your favorite plant to work with is.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because so what happens for me is I tend to work with certain plants for a time. It just it happens organically, as it does for, I think, most people. But like I've mentioned already, I think it keeps coming back to the trees for me. And maybe that's just something that maybe I need more of.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's sort of, when I was there, it was definitely the silver firs that I was with a lot. Back being South Africa, it's definitely been the baobabs and the redwoods, because we've got a few baby redwoods here in South Africa that are incredible. So tapping into connecting with those.
Yeah.
And then I work quite often with some trees that I've been connecting and dieting in the jungle, so of Peru. So those essences I've made are more of my own sort of process.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll offer them. I'm sort of undergoing a training there that I'll finish, and perhaps then I will offer them to others as well. But and then tobacco keeps coming up. It's always it's often very present. It's very grounding and brings clarity, and and then there's others that come and go. Like I've worked with nettle a lot recently, and like the sea trees, and a few of one of the succulents that keeps coming up. So I sorry, I can't just.
No, that's fine. It's a funny question that I even asked anyways, because I know I experience the same thing exactly. It's like you go through stages of working with different plants, and that you're just connected to them at that time. So it's the same for me. So it's interesting that I asked the question.
It's a good conversation starter though, because it gets you think. Yeah,
for sure. So kind of on that note, but I don't know if you've already maybe touched on it or not, but I guess, what is your most sort of memorable encounter with a plant or a tree or a flower, or whatever you'd like to share, if anything?
This again, there's so many. I feel I think that the one I think the one I'll share is one that happened a long time ago. Actually, it was before I started working with the essences and the plants in a more direct way, or more of the way I'm working with them now. I was at the time connecting with the plants, and I was at the time connecting with these plants, these South American plants. And some of them were trees, and they were just they were helping me to sort of cleanse my system for certain, almost like herbs, like almost like you would use herbs.
Yeah.
But they were these South American plants, but I had quite a deep love for a couple of them. You know how you're sort of just drawn to a few of them. And one of them was this tree, and I had never encountered it in life yet at the time. But I was undergoing a yoga training, and it was quite intensive, like I mentioned. And then we would sometimes hold postures for like a really long time, like for an hour, that you would like hold a certain posture. And I was doing this one posture, I think with my hand was up, and we had to do it for like an hour. And you had to have your hand up or something. But this was now after maybe days of we would of doing and I was tired, and I was just like, oh my God, how am I gonna? And you obviously go through different phases, and you kind of push through pain, and you kind of enter into different states. But this one time, I was just there, and I was meditating like this, and I just felt, okay, my hand's going to drop. It's fine, And then out of the blue, this tree, the presence of the tree stood next to me. Yeah. Like I honestly, I haven't told the story many times, but last time I told it like a while back, I just burst out crying, and I realized how it actually is still so touching for me, because nothing like that's happened since, nothing like that's happened before. Yeah. I had no idea of, maybe something like this happening or it coming into my space. At the time, I hadn't been. Now it's more of an interactive thing, as we say, we're communicating with them. At the time, I was more sending out an intention to connect with them, but I wasn't receiving anything back. I wasn't, maybe my receiver is not open yet. And anyway, and then the presence came. It stood there next to me. It was as though I could just hold my hand up there for however long I needed to, and I was just like resting like this, and it was so beautiful. And I think it's one of those things that I think also the story that helped me when I was doubting along the way of because I was like, but that happened. And I really didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when we have these little moments, these pockets of these beautiful moments. And I think that's one of those ones that I hold quite dear to my heart. It's very sweet and quite profound, actually. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Very cool. Yeah. All right. So I've just got one last question for you. And that is, what do you believe we need most as a collective at this time?
Yes. Yeah, it's again one that feels very simple, but also tricky. I could talk about it for a long time, but I think I would say, for me, I think it's connection. I think it comes down to connection. And like we were speaking about, like maybe you mentioned earlier, like the connection between the worlds and between each other. And I feel like I sensed really within myself, like what that brings, the wholeness and that kind of sense of belonging, that sense of groundedness and acceptance for each other's differences. I feel the connection is a big one for me. And then I think also what I feel comes up is like an awareness of how fear comes up in our lives. I don't know. That's another one, because I feel like people speak about that fear and love a lot, but like just that awareness of like how it actually manifests in the small ways and just kind of pulls us down. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so interesting you mentioned that because that's quite a big focus of mine, and I'm actually creating something at the moment to offer to people in that realm of just focusing on how big of a role that fear plays in our lives.
Amazing. Amazing. I think that's such important work. I've got like shivers as you say that. Such important work. That's very beautiful. And I think okay. I was going to ask you the same question. I was like, what do you think we need? But
well, definitely. I truly do believe that is that we, I see it as like an alchemization of fear into beauty, basically. And it's just, I see how fear is kind of like this driving force behind all of the pain and suffering that we go through individually and as a collective and as connected to everything. It's kind of like that base emotion, and that drives everything. And so I think for sure is what we need right now is a way to move past that and to release that and let it go where and when we can, and sort of to also recognize it, because I think people are so numb to even the role it plays in their lives and to how it is manifesting in their lives. And so all of those things.
Exactly what you say. I feel like it's something that we can sometimes say is like a word, and it can be quite abstract. And we go, we know. But it's really in the doing. And I find that that's something that I've also seen, like when we do trainings or workshops and things, like when I would do any kind of training that I would take part in, you get the information, but the you actually need the training, or you actually need the connection with each other when you're actually doing the practice, when you're actually seeing how that applies in your life. And like, for example, you can hear that word, but then how is it actually happening and manifesting, like you say, in your world? And it can be so transformative. I'm excited for you. That's beautiful. And for others.
I look forward to sharing with you.
Great. Yes, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on and to hear about your journey. And it's very inspiring. I love how much you've sort of traveled and worked with in all these different realms and areas in this world, in this other world. It's very, inspiring to hear about. So I hope that my own practice will take me that many places one day, and journeying through that many different sort of environments and landscapes. And so thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you. It's been lovely chatting to you, and it's been like a nice grounding experience. And I will say that I think that we really can I think connect to any plant that really draws us, right? And I think that it's quite an exciting prospect, really. And sometimes I think that even like the simplest, most sort of like, ordinary ones that we have around us, I think are like the ones that we can really, receive a lot from, and also, create a sort of a relationship that can be really beautiful and nourishing for everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I agree. And if anyone would like to find you and your offerings, can you share where they can do that?
Yeah. So I spell my website, senessences.com, and I Sen dash essences, and on Instagram, same thing. Sen, I think, dot essences. And feel free to reach out. I love to connect people about this work, and
and I'll put it all in the notes below the show. But thank you again. And thank you everyone
it's my pleasure.
Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. So you can find everything in the show notes, and if you have any questions for either of us or about the episode, please share them with us, and we'll endeavour to get back to you. Thank you again, and have a beautiful day, everyone.